The morning Rosa Owens woke unable to breathe lying flat was the morning everything changed, though she did not know it yet. As she gasped and clawed her way upright against the boarding house wall, her lungs finally expanding once gravity stopped pressing the fluid in her chest against her heart. The doctor had warned her 3 weeks ago that the lung fever might leave lasting damage, but she had not understood what that meant until she spent the entire night propped against her headboard, dozing in fragments, her chin dropping to her chest and jerking her awake every few minutes. She was 22 years old, and she had been working as a seamstress in Steins Pass, New Mexico since her father died 2 years prior, leaving her alone in a territory that did not forgive weakness. The sun rose hot and merciless through her single window, and Rosa forced herself to stand, her legs shaking beneath her calico dress. She had 3 orders to complete by week's end, and Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, would expect her rent on Friday whether Rosa slept or not. Her fingers fumbled with her hair, pinning it back in a simple bun, and she studied her reflections in the small mirror above her wash basin. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her cheekbones stood out too sharply in her pale face. She looked like a ghost, she thought, and then pushed the thought away because ghosts did not have to sew wedding dresses for other women. The boarding house dining room smelled of coffee and bacon, and Rosa's stomach turned even as her mouth watered. She had barely eaten in days, her appetite stolen by exhaustion. Mrs. Henderson looked up from the stove, her broad face creasing with concern. "You look terrible, dear. Did you sleep at all?" "Some," Rosa lied, accepting the cup of coffee Mrs. Henderson pressed into her hands. The warmth felt good against her palms, and she wrapped her fingers around the tin cup, letting the heat anchor her to the moment. "You should see the doctor again." "I cannot afford another visit. He already told me what I have." "Rest in time," he said. "I have time. Rest will have to wait until the orders are complete." Mrs. Henderson clicked her tongue, but did not argue further. She knew as well as Rosa did that women alone had few choices in towns like Steins Pass, where the railroad brought rough men and rougher work, where the Apache Wars had only ended a decade ago, and where respectability was the only currency that mattered for a woman without family or fortune. Rosa carried her coffee to the small workroom off the kitchen, where Mrs. Henderson allowed her to keep her sewing supplies in exchange for mending the household linens. The wedding dress hung on a dressmaker's form, white lace and silk, that had been shipped all the way from Santa Fe. Rosa had spent 2 weeks on the bodice alone, and now she needed to attach the skirt and finish the hem. Her eyes burned as she threaded her needle, and she blinked hard, forcing her vision to clear. She worked through the morning, her fingers moving automatically through stitches she had made 1,000 times before, but her neck ached from the awkward angle she had slept in, and her back throbbed with a deep, grinding pain that seemed to radiate from her spine into her ribs. By noon, she could barely hold her needle steady, and she set it down with a frustrated sound that was half sob, half growl. "I cannot do this," she whispered to the empty room, and then felt ashamed for saying it aloud, as if speaking the words made them more true. The bell above the front door chimed, and Rosa heard Mrs. Henderson greeting someone in the front hall. Male voices, deep and weary, the sound of boots on wooden floors. Rosa paid no attention, focused on taking slow, careful breaths, trying to ease the pressure in her chest. "Rosa?" Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, her expression curious. "There is a gentleman here asking about furniture repair. I told him you might know someone since you knew your father's trade." Rosa looked up, confused. Her father had been a carpenter before the consumption took him, and she had spent her childhood in his workshop learning to measure and cut and join wood, but she had not touched tools in 2 years, not since she sold everything to pay for his burial. "I do not do that work anymore," she said. I know, dear, but perhaps you know someone who does? He seems desperate." Rosa sighed and stood, her vision swimming for a moment as blood rushed from her head. She steadied herself against the table and followed Mrs. Henderson into the front hall. The man standing there was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard and ate sparingly. He wore dusty trail clothes and a battered hat he held in his hands, turning it in a nervous circle. His face was sun-darkened and angular, with gray eyes that met hers directly without the sliding assessment she had learned to expect from men. He looked to be perhaps 25, maybe 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that needed shaving. "Madam," he said, his voice rough with disuse, "my name is Kane Sutton. I'm looking for someone who can do custom carpentry. Mrs. Henderson said you might know of someone." "I knew someone," Rosa said carefully, "but he is gone now. There is a man named Phillips who does work near the railroad depot. He might be able to help you." Kane Sutton shook his head. "I spoke with Phillips. He said he is backed up for 2 months, and I need something made quickly." He hesitated, his fingers tightening on his hat brim. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned your father was a carpenter. Would you be willing to take on the work?" Rosa felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. "I am a seamstress, Mr. Sutton. I do not build furniture." "But you know how?" "Knowing and doing are different things. I have not worked wood in 2 years, and I do not have tools anymore." "I have tools," he said quickly. "At my ranch, outside town. I have a full workshop. I just need someone who knows what they're doing to guide the work, or to do it themselves if they are willing. I can pay well." Rosa started to refuse again, but then she swayed slightly, her hand reaching for the wall. Kane Sutton moved forward instinctively, his hand catching her elbow, steadying her. His touch was gentle, careful, and he released her as soon as she had her balance. "Are you all right?" His gray eyes studied her face with concern that seemed genuine. "I am fine, just tired." "You are more than tired." He glanced at Mrs. Henderson, then back at Rosa. "Forgive me for being forward, but you look like you have not slept in days." "That is not your concern, Mr. Sutton." "No, madam, it is not, but I still need a carpenter. And you look like you need money. Mrs. Henderson says you're the best seamstress in Steins Pass, which tells me you do good work. That is what I need, good work, and quickly." Rosa closed her eyes briefly. She did need money. The rent was due, and her food stores were low, and the orders she had now would barely cover her expenses for the next month. But the thought of working wood again, of measuring and sawing and sanding, felt like stepping backward into a past she had deliberately left behind. "What do you need made?" she heard herself ask. Kane Sutton's shoulders relaxed slightly. "A chair, but not a regular chair, something specific. I can explain better if you come see my workshop, see what I have to work with. I cannot leave town today. I have orders to complete. Tomorrow, then, I can come fetch you in my wagon, bring you out to the ranch. If you decide you cannot do it after you see what I'm asking, I will pay you for your time and bring you back. $5 just for looking." $5 for a few hours of her time, Rosa calculated quickly. That would cover her rent with money left over. And if she actually took the job, built whatever strange chair he wanted, she could charge more. Enough to buy food, to take a day off and sleep, really sleep, instead of drowsing upright against a wall. "Tomorrow," she said, "but I make no promises about taking the work." "That is fair." Kane Sutton nodded and settled his hat back on his head. "I will be here at 8 in the morning, if that suits you." 8 o'clock. He thanked Mrs. Henderson and left, and Rosa watched through the window as he mounted a sturdy brown horse and rode east, toward the open range beyond town. Mrs. Henderson appeared at her shoulder, watching with undisguised interest. "He seemed like a decent sort," the older woman said carefully. "He seemed like a man who needs furniture built." "He looked at you kindly." "Mrs. Henderson." Rosa turned to face her landlady, trying to keep her voice gentle. "Please do not read more into this than exists. He needs a carpenter. I need money. That is the extent of it." Mrs. Henderson hummed non-committally, but said nothing more, and Rosa returned to her sewing room, trying to ignore the small flutter of something in her chest that might have been hope, or might have been simply the irregular beating of her damaged lungs. That night, Rosa tried to sleep lying down, and lasted perhaps 20 minutes before she was gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hauled herself upright and spent the rest of the night as she had spent the previous ones, propped against her headboard, her body screaming for real rest even as her lungs refused to allow it. By the time the sky began to lighten, she felt wrung out and shaky, and she seriously considered sending word to Kane Sutton that she could not come. But pride and poverty were powerful motivators, and at 7:30 she was washed and dressed, her hair pinned securely, her sewing kit packed in case she finished early and could work on the boarding house mending while she rode. Mrs. Henderson pressed a packet of biscuits and jerky into her hands, and Rosa ate mechanically, forcing the food down. Kane Sutton arrived precisely at 8, driving a sturdy wagon drawn by 2 good horses. He climbed down and offered her his hand to help her up onto the seat, and Rosa took it, grateful for the assistance even as she hated needing it. He had shaved since yesterday, she noticed, and his clothes were clean, though still work-worn. "Thank you for coming," he said as he took up the reins. "Thank you for the opportunity, and for the advance payment." He reached into his vest pocket and handed her $5 silver without comment. Rosa tucked them into her purse and settled herself on the hard wagon seat, watching as Steins Pass fell away behind them. The land here was harsh and beautiful, all red rock and scrub brush, with mountains rising in the distance like sleeping giants. The morning air was cool, but already beginning to warm, promising another blazing day. It was late April of 1893, and the desert was painted with the last wildflowers of spring, small bursts of yellow and purple against the dust. They rode in silence for a while, and Rosa found herself studying Kane Sutton from the corner of her eye. He handled the horses with easy competence, and his profile was calm, almost peaceful. There was something self-contained about him, she thought, as if he had learned to be comfortable with solitude. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked finally, more to break the silence than from real curiosity. 3 years. I bought it from a man who was heading back east after his wife died. It is not much, just a small herd and enough land to graze them, but it is mine." "You run it alone?" "I have a hand who comes in during branding and when I need to move the cattle. Otherwise, yes, alone." Rosa nodded. She understood something about solitude herself. "What made you come to Steins Pass?" Kane asked. "My father. He thought the dry air would be good for his lungs. It was not." She said it flatly, without emotion, because emotions did not change the past. "I am sorry." "So am I." They fell silent again, but it was a more comfortable silence now, the quiet of 2 people who understood that some losses could not be talked away. The ranch appeared after about 40 minutes of riding, a simple wooden house with a barn and several outbuildings scattered across a shallow valley. A windmill turned slowly in the breeze, and Rosa could see cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the pale grass. Kane drove the wagon directly to a large outbuilding and helped Rosa down. Inside, the workshop was dim and cool, smelling of sawdust and wood oil. Tools hung on the walls in neat rows, and a workbench stretched along one side, scarred and stained from use. Rosa felt something tighten in her chest that had nothing to do with her damaged lungs. This was her father's workshop, or near enough. The same tools, the same ordered chaos, the same sense of purpose. "This is impressive," she said quietly. "You keep it well." "I do not use it much. The man I bought the ranch from left all this behind. I have done some repairs, fixed a fence or 2, but I do not have the skill for real carpentry." Kane crossed to the workbench and picked up a piece of paper covered in rough sketches. "This is what I need made. I know it is strange, but I have my reasons." Rosa took the paper and studied it. The sketches showed a chair, but unlike any she had seen before, the back was high and angled, and there seemed to be some kind of mechanism that would allow it to recline, to move from upright to nearly horizontal. The drawings were crude, but clear enough that she could see what he was trying to achieve. "This is for someone who cannot lie down flat," she said slowly, understanding dawning. Kane looked at her steadily. "Yes." someone whose lungs do not work right when they are horizontal, someone who needs to sleep sitting up but who cannot do that comfortably in a regular chair. Rosa felt heat rise in her cheeks. You are making this for me. I am hiring you to make it, but yes, I hoped you would use it. You do not even know me. I know you looked like you were about to fall down yesterday. I know Mrs. Henderson told me you have been sick and that you spend your nights sitting up because you cannot breathe otherwise. I know that you work yourself half to death because you have no other choice. He took the paper back from her hands gently. I have the money to pay for the materials and your time. You have the skill to build it. This seems like a fair trade. This seems like charity. Then consider it a loan. Build the chair, use it until you are healed, and then give it back to me, or keep it and pay me when you can. I do not care about that part. Rosa felt her throat tighten with something that might have been tears, but she refused to let them fall. She had not cried when her father died, and she would not cry now over a stranger's kindness. Why? She asked, her voice rough. Why do you care? Kane was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than before. My mother had the same problem after she had pneumonia. She spent the last 6 months of her life sleeping propped up on pillows, exhausted all the time. My father tried to make her comfortable, but nothing really worked. She died when I was 16. He set the paper down on the workbench. I cannot help her now, but I can help you if you will let me. Rosa looked at the sketches again, seeing them differently now. This was not charity. This was grief channeled into purpose, loss transformed into action. She understood that better than perhaps he realized. I will need to take measurements, she said finally, of angles, of height. This kind of mechanism requires precision. Whatever you need. And I will pay you back, Mr. Sutton. If I use this chair, I will pay you back every cent. Call me Kane, and we can argue about payment later. Rosa almost smiled. No, we will definitely argue about it. They spent the next hour going over the design in more detail. Kane had thought about this carefully, Rosa realized. The chair would need to be sturdy enough to support a person's full weight at different angles, but the mechanism had to move smoothly without jarring. The back should be padded for comfort, and the angle adjustable so the user could find the position that worked best for their breathing. Rosa found herself caught up in the problem, her mind working through solutions the way it had when she was a girl helping her father design a cabinet or a table. She sketched modifications on Kane's rough drawings, her hand steady despite her exhaustion. They would need strong hinges, she explained, and a locking mechanism to keep the back from sliding down unexpectedly. The base would need to be weighted or very wide to prevent tipping. Kane listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he understood what she was explaining. He was intelligent, Rosa thought, and he took her expertise seriously without condescension. It was refreshing and strange and a little frightening in how much she found herself responding to it. By the time they had a workable plan, the sun was high and hot. Kane insisted on feeding her lunch, and Rosa was too hungry and tired to refuse. They ate at the simple table in his kitchen, cold chicken and bread with butter, and Rosa could not remember when food had tasted so good. She realized she was ravenously hungry, that she had been existing on scraps for too long. When can you start? Kane asked as she finished her second piece of bread. I have sewing orders that must be completed by the end of the week. After that, I could come out on Saturday, work through Sunday if you would allow it. I will come get you Saturday morning, and you can stay here if you want in the spare room. Save the travel time. Rosa hesitated. Staying overnight at a bachelor's ranch would be scandalous if anyone found out. But the thought of saving 2 hours of travel each day was tempting, and her body ached for rest. I will think about it, she said carefully. Kane nodded, accepting her caution. The offer stands either way. He drove her back to town in the early afternoon, and Rosa spent the rest of the day and evening working on her sewing orders with renewed focus. She had something to look forward to now, a project that excited her in a way hemming dresses never had. Her fingers flew over the fabric, and she finished the wedding dress skirt by midnight, her eyes gritty with exhaustion but satisfied. She slept sitting up again that night, or tried to, and dreamed of her father's workshop, of the smell of fresh cut pine and the sound of a saw biting through wood. In her dream, she was young again and healthy, and her father was showing her how to measure twice and cut once, his patient voice explaining the importance of precision. She woke with tears on her face and the sun streaming through her window, and she let herself cry for just a moment before wiping her eyes and starting the new day. The week passed in a blur of work and exhaustion. Rosa finished all 3 of her orders and collected her payments, and on Friday she paid Mrs. Henderson her rent and bought supplies for the carpentry project. She purchased good hinges from the general store, along with screws and bolts, and she used some of her precious savings to buy fabric for padding and cushions. The owner gave her an odd look when she asked for wood stain and sandpaper alongside dress thread, but Rosa ignored the curiosity in his eyes. Saturday morning arrived clear and hot, and Kane appeared at 8 o'clock as promised. Rosa had packed a small bag with a change of clothes and her nightgown, having decided that staying at the ranch made practical sense regardless of what gossips might say. Mrs. Henderson gave her a knowing look but said only that she should be careful and come home if she felt unsafe. Rosa promised she would, touched by the older woman's concern. The ride to the ranch felt shorter this time, perhaps because Rosa was anticipating it, or perhaps because she and Kane talked more easily now. He asked about her sewing, and she asked about his cattle, and the conversation flowed without awkwardness. Rosa found herself laughing at a story he told about a particularly stubborn bull, and the sound surprised her. She had not laughed in a long time. The workshop was exactly as she remembered, and Rosa set to work immediately, measuring and marking the wood Kane had purchased according to her specifications. It was good pine, clear and straight, and her hands remembered the feel of it, the slight give under her pencil, the way the grain ran. She selected her pieces carefully and began to cut, using the handsaw with steady, even strokes that made her shoulders ache but felt deeply, profoundly right. Kane worked alongside her, following her instructions without question. He held boards steady while she cut, helped her lift and position the heavier pieces, and fetch tools before she had to ask for them. He was a good assistant, quiet and attentive, and Rosa appreciated his competence. By midday, they had the basic frame assembled, and Rosa stepped back to assess their progress. "It is coming together well," she said, satisfaction warming her voice. "You know what you're doing. It shows." My father was a good teacher. They ate lunch on the porch of the ranch house, sitting in the shade and watching the cattle move slowly across the valley. The landscape shimmered with heat, and Rosa felt sweat trickling down her spine despite the shade. But there was something peaceful about it, something vast and timeless that made her small concerns feel manageable. "Do you miss it?" Kane asked. "The carpentry?" Rosa considered the question honestly. "I miss working with my hands on something solid. Sewing is fine, but cloth is temporary. It wears out, goes out of fashion, gets discarded. Wood lasts. Something you build can outlive you." "So why did you stop?" "I had to sell the tools to pay for my father's burial. And no one wants to hire a woman carpenter. Seamstress work was available, respectable. It made sense. But it does not make you happy." "Happiness is a luxury I cannot afford, Mr. Sutton." Kane. Kane. She said his name carefully, testing how it felt on her tongue. "Happiness is still a luxury." "Maybe, but satisfaction is not. You look satisfied right now working on this." Rosa glanced at him and found him watching her with those steady gray eyes. "I am satisfied," she admitted. "Thank you for giving me the chance to feel this way again. Thank you for being willing to take it." They returned to the workshop and worked through the afternoon. Rosa showed Kane how to use the wood plane to smooth the rough boards, and he learned quickly, his movements becoming more confident as he practiced. They installed the hinges together, Rosa explaining how to align them precisely so the back would move smoothly through its arc. It was delicate work, requiring patience and attention, and she found herself absorbed in it completely, her exhaustion forgotten in the focus required. As the sun began to set, Kane insisted she stop for the day. Rosa protested that she wanted to finish the support mechanism, but he shook his head firmly. You are swaying on your feet. The work will still be here tomorrow. I am fine. You are exhausted. Come on, I will show you the spare room. Too tired to argue further, Rosa let him lead her into the house. The spare room was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a washstand, and a window that looked out over the valley. Kane brought her water for washing and fresh linens for the bed, and he pointed out where she could find him if she needed anything during the night. There is stew on the stove for supper whenever you're hungry, he said. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. You are very kind. I am practical. You cannot work if you collapse. Rosa smiled despite herself. Is that all I am? A carpenter you hired? Kane paused in the doorway, his expression serious. No, but I did not think you would want me to say the rest. What is the rest? That you are a woman who deserves better than sleeping sitting up against a wall, that you work harder than anyone I've ever met, and that you should not have to do it alone, that I have thought about you every day since I saw you nearly fall in Mrs. Henderson's hallway. He met her eyes directly. But like I said, I did not think you would want me to say that. Rosa felt her heart stutter in her chest, and for once it had nothing to do with her damaged lungs. Kane, I will let you rest. Good night, Rosa. He closed the door gently behind him, and Rosa stood in the middle of the small room, her hands trembling slightly. She had not expected this, had not allowed herself to consider that his kindness might be motivated by more than grief and generosity, and she did not know what to do with the feeling rising in her chest, something warm and terrifying that felt dangerously like hope. She tried to sleep lying down that night, in the comfortable bed Kane had prepared for her, and managed nearly an hour before her lungs rebelled. She sat up gasping, her hands pressed to her chest, and waited for the panic to subside. When she could breathe again, she pulled the pillows against the headboard and settled into her usual position, upright and aching. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow we finish the chair, and then I can rest properly, and after that, we will see what happens. Sleep came in fragments, but it came, and Rosa dreamed of strong hands and steady eyes, of a man who built things instead of breaking them, and when she woke in the morning, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt ready. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, and Rosa washed and dressed quickly, eager to return to the workshop. She found Kane already in the kitchen, cooking eggs and bacon over the wood stove. He smiled when he saw her, and Rosa felt that strange flutter in her chest again. How did you sleep? He asked. As well as I ever do, better, knowing the chair will be finished today. They ate quickly and headed to the workshop, and Rosa threw herself into the final stages of construction. The support mechanism was the most complex part, requiring careful calibration to ensure it would hold at multiple angles without slipping. She worked slowly and methodically, testing each adjustment, while Kane prepared the padding and cushions, following her instructions on how to attach them securely. By early afternoon, the chair was complete. It stood in the center of the workshop, sturdy and simple, and more beautiful to Rosa than any wedding dress she had ever sewn. The wood was smooth and golden, the hinges gleamed, and the padding was thick and soft. Kane had carved a simple pattern into the arms, she noticed, a flowing vine design that added elegance without ostentation. When did you do that? She asked, tracing the carving with one finger. Last night after you went to bed. I thought it should be special. Rosa felt tears prick her eyes, and this time she did not fight them. It is perfect. You should try it. She hesitated, suddenly nervous, but Kane took her hand and led her to the chair. She sat carefully, feeling the padding give beneath her weight, and then leaned back. Kane showed her how the adjustment mechanism worked, a simple lever on the side that released the lock. She pushed it and felt the back recline smoothly, her body angling backward in a way that had been impossible for weeks, and she could breathe. The angle was perfect, supporting her at exactly the right position to keep the pressure off her lungs while allowing her to rest fully. It was like magic, or like mercy, and Rosa felt something break open inside her chest. "Oh," she whispered. And then she was crying in earnest, tears streaming down her face, as weeks of exhaustion and pain and fear finally found release. Kane knelt beside the chair, his hand covering hers where it rested on the arm. "Is it all right? Does it hurt anywhere?" "No, no, it is perfect. I can breathe, Kane. I can finally breathe." He smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "Good. That is all I wanted." Rosa sat in the chair for a long time, adjusting the angle slightly, testing different positions. Each one worked. Each one let her breathe freely while supporting her body. She could sleep in this, she thought. She could actually sleep deeply and properly and wake rested instead of exhausted. "How much do I owe you?" she asked finally, though the thought of leaving the chair behind made her chest tighten. "Nothing. It is yours." "Kane, we discussed this." "No, you discussed it. I listened. The chair is yours, Rosa, a gift, freely given." "I cannot accept such an expensive gift from a man I barely know." "Then get to know me better." He stood, offering her his hand. "Stay for supper. Stay tonight if you want. Rest in the chair, see how you feel, and then decide what you owe me, if anything." Rosa looked at his outstretched hand, at his patient face, and she thought about all the things she wanted to say, that she was afraid of owing anyone anything, that accepting help felt like weakness, that she had learned to survive alone and did not know how to do anything else. But what came out was simply, "All right." They carried the chair into the house together, setting it in the spare room near the window. Rosa tested it again, adjusting it to a comfortable angle, and then forced herself to stand to help Kane prepare supper. They worked together in the kitchen, and Rosa found a rhythm with him that felt natural, easy. He chopped vegetables while she mixed biscuit dough, and they moved around each other without collision or awkwardness. Over supper, they talked about everything and nothing. Kane told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents and drifting west, about buying the ranch and learning to build a life from scratch. Rosa told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about moving with her father to New Mexico in a desperate attempt to save his failing health, about the shock of being alone in a world that had no place for solitary women. "You're not alone anymore," Kane said quietly, "if you do not want to be." "I do not know what I want," Rosa admitted. "I have spent so long just surviving that I forgot to think about anything else." "Then think about it now. What would you want if you could have anything?" Rosa considered the question seriously. "I would want to work with wood again. To build things that matter, things that last. I would want a place that felt like home, not just a rented room. I would want—" She hesitated, then made herself say it. "I would want someone who sees me as I am, not as what I should be or could be. Someone who builds me chairs instead of trying to fix me." Kane reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was calloused from work, warm and solid against her fingers. "I see you, Rosa, and you do not need fixing." They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, something unspoken passing between them. Then Rosa squeezed his fingers gently and released them, suddenly shy. "I should try the chair properly, see if I can actually sleep in it." "Of course, I will clean up here." Rosa retreated to the spare room and changed into her nightgown, feeling strange and vulnerable. She settled into the chair and adjusted the angle until it felt perfect, then pulled the blanket Kane had provided over her lap. The padding cradled her body, and she could breathe easily, deeply, without pain or panic. She closed her eyes, expecting to lie awake as she always did, restless and uncomfortable. Instead, she fell asleep almost immediately, dropping into a deep, dreamless rest that claimed her completely. She slept for 12 hours straight, her body finally getting the recovery it desperately needed, And when she woke, it was to morning sunlight and the smell of coffee and the realization that she felt better than she had in weeks. Kane was in the kitchen when she emerged, still in her nightgown and wrapper, too groggy to care about propriety. He took one look at her face and smiled. "You slept." "I slept." "Kane, I slept all night. I did not wake up once." "The chair works, then." "The chair is a miracle." She crossed to him impulsively and wrapped her arms around him, hugging him tightly. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Kane returned the embrace carefully, his arms coming around her with a gentleness that made her throat tight. He was solid and warm, and Rosa realized she fit against him perfectly, her head tucked beneath his chin. They stood like that for a long moment, neither wanting to break the contact, until finally Rosa stepped back, suddenly aware of how intimate the gesture had been. "I am sorry. I did not mean to be forward." "I am not sorry, and you can be as forward as you want as far as I am concerned." Rosa felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I should get dressed. I need to get back to town." "Or you could stay another day, rest more, make sure the chair really works." "I have orders to complete." "Do you have any due this week?" Rosa hesitated. "No, but I should be working anyway." "Why?" "Give yourself a day, Rosa. You have been running yourself into the ground for months. Take time to recover." It was sensible advice, and her body was screaming at her to listen to it. But staying another day meant spending more time with Kane, meant allowing this fragile thing between them to grow stronger. And that frightened her more than exhaustion ever could. "I will stay today," she said finally, "but I need to go back tomorrow." "That is fair." They spent the day in quiet companionship. Kane had ranch work to do, and Rosa insisted on helping despite his protests. She found she enjoyed it. The simple physical labor of mending fences and checking water troughs. It was different from carpentry or sewing, but it engaged her body in a way that felt good, healthy. And working beside Kane felt right in a way she could not quite explain. That evening they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Rosa felt peaceful in a way she had not experienced in years, and when Kane reached over and took her hand, she laced her fingers through his without hesitation. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "I am glad you asked me." "Rosa, I need to tell you something." She looked at him, seeing uncertainty in his expression for the first time. "What is it?" "I did not hire you just to build a chair. I mean, I did need the chair built, and I did want you to have it. But that was not the only reason." He took a breath. "I saw you in town 3 weeks ago, the day after you got sick. You were walking to the general store and you looked so tired, so determined, and I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. I asked Mrs. Henderson about you and she told me your situation, and I have been trying to think of a way to help you ever since." Rosa's heart was pounding. "So this was all a plan? To get me out here?" "No, not a plan exactly, more like hope. I hoped if I could give you a reason to come here, you might see that someone cares what happens to you, that you do not have to do everything alone." "Kane." Rosa did not know what else to say. "I know it is too soon. I know you probably think I am crazy, some stranger who builds you furniture and claims to care about you, but I do care, Rosa. I have cared since the first time I saw you, and I wanted you to know that even if you decide tomorrow that you never want to see me again." Rosa was quiet for a long moment, sorting through her feelings. Fear was there, certainly, the bone-deep terror of trusting someone, of letting herself need another person. But there was also something else, something warm and insistent that whispered maybe and yes and please. "I do not think you are crazy," she said finally. "Or if you are, then I am too. Because I have thought about you every day since you walked into Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, and that frightens me, Kane. It frightens me how much I want this to be real. It is real. I promise you it is real." "How can you be sure? You do not know me, not really." "I know you work harder than anyone should have to. I know you are proud and skilled and unwilling to accept help even when you desperately need it. I know you cry when you are grateful, and that you fit perfectly in my arms. I know that sleeping next to you, even with a wall between us, felt more right than anything I have done in years. He turned on the bench to face her fully. I know enough, Rosa. The rest we can learn together. Rosa felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were good tears this time, born of hope instead of despair. I am so tired of being alone. Then do not be alone anymore. Stay, not just tonight, but for as long as you want. Work your carpentry here. Use my workshop. Build whatever you want. I will help you get commissions. Spread the word that you are taking projects. You can keep doing sewing too if you want or not, whatever makes you happy. People will talk. A single woman living with a single man. Then marry me. Rosa laughed, the sound breaking on a sob. You cannot be serious. You just said you know it is too soon. Too soon to expect you to love me back, maybe, but not too soon to know what I want. I want you here, Rosa, in my home, in my life, in my bed, if you will have me there. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are safe and rested and cared for. I want to build things with you and watch you work and learn what makes you smile. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Marry me. Or do not marry me, but stay anyway. Or go back to town and let me court you properly for 6 months and then marry me. I do not care about the order of things, as long as the ending is you and me together. You are crazy, Rosa whispered, but she was smiling. Is that a yes? It is a maybe. It is a let me think about it, let me sleep on it, let me make sure this is real, and not just exhaustion making me lose my mind. I can work with maybe. Kane kissed her then, gentle and careful, his lips soft against hers. Rosa melted into it, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, and the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more necessary. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Rosa felt dizzy with want and wonder. I should go inside, she said, though she made no move to stand. You should. Kane? Yes? Ask me again in the morning. His smile was brilliant in the fading light. I will ask you every morning until you say yes. Rosa slept in the chair again that night, and this time she dreamed of a future instead of a past. She dreamed of a workshop full of sunlight and sawdust, of strong hands helping her lift heavy boards, of a man who saw her as an equal and a partner. And when she woke in the morning to find Kane standing in the doorway with coffee and that patient, hopeful expression, she knew what her answer would be. Yes, she said before he could ask. Yes to coffee? Yes to everything, to staying, to marrying you, to building a life together. Yes, Kane. My answer is yes. He set the coffee down carefully and crossed to her, pulling her up from the chair and into his arms. This kiss was different from the night before, full of joy and promise, and the sweet relief of uncertainty resolved. Rosa wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight, thinking that this was what safety felt like. This was what home felt like. They married a week later, a simple ceremony in the Steins Pass church with Mrs. Henderson and the ranch hand as witnesses. Rosa wore a dress she had made herself, pale blue cotton with lace at the collar, and Kane wore a new shirt and his best trousers. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Kane kissed her in front of God and everyone, and Rosa felt her whole world shift and settle into something solid and good. Mrs. Henderson cried and hugged them both, and even the ranch hand, a taciturn older man named Joe, smiled and wished them well. They had a small celebration dinner at the boarding house, and then Kane drove Rosa back to the ranch in the wagon, her few belongings packed in trunks behind them. I still cannot believe this is happening, Rosa said as the ranch came into view. Believe it. You are stuck with me now, Mrs. Sutton. Mrs. Sutton. Rosa tested the name, liking how it sounded. That will take some getting used to. We have time. We have all the time in the world." Kane carried her over the threshold of the ranch house, both of them laughing at the silliness of the tradition, and then he set her down gently in the middle of the main room. It was small and spare, but it was clean and solid, and Rosa could already see how she would make it a home. Curtains for the windows, cushions for the chairs, maybe a rug for the floor. Her mind was already planning, organizing, building. "What are you thinking?" Kane asked, watching her face. "That I want to make this place ours. Not yours or mine, but ours together." "I like the sound of that." They spent the evening arranging Rosa's things, finding places for her clothes and sewing supplies. Kane cleared space in the workshop for her carpentry tools, which she planned to purchase now that she had a place to keep them. They talked about taking on commissions together, about her building furniture and him managing the ranch, about becoming a team in all things. That night, Rosa moved the reclining chair into their bedroom, though she hoped soon she would not need it. Kane held her close in the big bed, his arms around her waist, and Rosa found that lying against his chest, her head pillowed on his shoulder, she could breathe almost as well as she could in the chair. It was his warmth, she thought, or perhaps just the safety of being held, but her lungs did not rebel as they usually did. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, saying it for the first time. "I love you too," Kane replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you refusing to fall down in that hallway." "That seems like a lifetime ago." "In some ways it was. We are different people now." Rosa thought about that. He was right. She was no longer the exhausted, desperate woman sleeping upright against a wall, and he was no longer a lonely rancher with nothing but grief and cattle for company. They had built something together, something solid and lasting, and it had changed them both. The weeks that followed established their rhythm. Kane worked the ranch with Joe's help, and Rosa set up her carpentry business, spreading word through Mrs. Henderson and the general store that she was taking commissions. To her surprise and delight, work came quickly. A merchant needed display cases for his store. A family wanted a dining table and chairs. The school teacher requested a bookshelf for the classroom. Rosa worked in the shop Kane had prepared, and Kane helped whenever she needed an extra pair of hands. They fell into an easy partnership, talking through designs, problem-solving together, celebrating each completed project. And slowly, steadily, Rosa's health improved. The rest she was finally getting, combined with good food and reduced stress, allowed her lungs to heal. She found she could lie flat for short periods now, though she still preferred the reclining chair for sleeping. 3 months after their wedding, a couple came to the ranch asking about furniture, and the woman mentioned that she had heard Rosa could build custom pieces for people with health needs. Word had spread, it seemed, about the unusual reclining chair, and now others wanted similar specialized furniture. An elderly man with back pain needed a chair that supported his spine differently. A pregnant woman wanted something that would be comfortable in her final months. Rosa found her calling in this work, designing and building furniture that made people's lives easier, better. She charged fair prices, and soon she had more work than she could handle alone. Kane helped when he could, but the ranch required attention too, especially during calving season. "We should hire an apprentice," Kane suggested one evening as they reviewed her order list. "Someone you could teach, who could help with the simpler projects. That would cost money." "We have money. Your business is doing well, Rosa. Better than well. You should expand." They discussed it for several days and eventually hired a young man named Thomas who had some carpentry experience and a willingness to learn. Rosa taught him carefully, passing on her father's lessons, and found she enjoyed having a student. Thomas was quick and attentive, and his help allowed her to take on even more specialized commissions. By their first anniversary, Rosa's carpentry business was thriving, and Kane's ranch was expanding. They had saved enough to buy more cattle and additional land. Life was full and busy, but no longer desperate. Rosa still used the reclining chair sometimes on days when her lungs felt tight or the weather turned cold and damp. But most nights she slept in Kane's arms, breathing easily, dreaming peacefully. "I want to build something special for our anniversary," Rosa told Kane as the date approached. "What kind of something?" "A bed, a proper marriage bed big enough for both of us with a headboard I can carve, something beautiful and permanent." "I love that idea, but you should let me help." They designed it together, sketching late into the night, debating details and measurements. The headboard would be oak, solid, and rich, and Rosa planned to carve it with intertwining vines and flowers, a symbol of their lives growing together. The frame would be mortise and tenon joinery, strong enough to last generations. They worked on it in secret moments stolen from their other responsibilities, and on their anniversary morning they installed it in their bedroom, replacing the simple bed frame that had been there before. The mattress fit perfectly, and Rosa had made a new quilt in deep blues and greens. Kane tested it first, bouncing slightly and making her laugh. "It is perfect," he declared, "strong and beautiful, like the woman who built it." "We built it together." The best things are built together. They celebrated their anniversary quietly, just the two of them, with a good meal and dancing in the kitchen to music only they could hear. And that night they christened the new bed properly, Rosa discovering that love could be gentle and fierce all at once, that Kane's hands on her body felt like coming home, that pleasure and safety could exist in the same moment. Afterward, lying tangled together, Rosa traced the scars on Kane's chest, old injuries from a life of hard work. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, taking on a half-broken seamstress with bad lungs. "You were never broken, and my only regret is that I did not meet you sooner." He kissed her forehead. "Though I suppose if I had, we might not have been ready for each other. Sometimes timing matters." "We were lucky." "We were, and we still are." The seasons turned and life continued its forward motion. Rosa's business grew until she was known throughout the territory as the woman who built furniture for special needs. People traveled from as far as Santa Fe to commission her work, and she hired 2 more apprentices to keep up with demand. Kane expanded the workshop, adding more space and better equipment. Their prosperity allowed them to help others. When a family in town lost everything to fire, Rosa and Kane donated furniture to help them rebuild. When the church needed new pews, Rosa designed them to be more comfortable for elderly parishioners. They became pillars of the small community known for their generosity and their solid partnership. 2 years into their marriage, Rosa realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. Her lungs were better but not perfect, and she worried about how her body would handle the strain of carrying a child. Kane was thrilled and terrified too, his excitement tempered by concern for her health. "We will get through it together," he promised, holding her close. "Whatever happens, we will face it together." Rosa visited the doctor in Deming, a 2-day journey by wagon, and returned with cautious optimism. The doctor thought she could carry a child safely if she was careful, if she rested when needed, if she did not overwork herself. Kane immediately insisted she cut back on carpentry work, and Rosa reluctantly agreed, letting her apprentices take over most of the physical labor while she focused on design and supervision. The pregnancy was harder than she expected, but not as terrible as she feared. Her lungs struggled sometimes, especially in the final months, and she spent many nights sleeping in the reclining chair again, her belly too big and her breath too short to lie flat. But Kane was endlessly patient, endlessly supportive, bringing her water and adjusting her pillows and rubbing her swollen feet without complaint. "I'm sorry," she said one night, exhausted and uncomfortable. "I know this is not what you signed up for." "This is exactly what I signed up for, in sickness and in health, remember?" "I do not remember agreeing to turn into a whale." Kane laughed and kissed her rounded stomach. "You are beautiful. You have never been more beautiful." Their son was born on a cool October morning in 1895, after a long labor that left Rosa exhausted but triumphant. Kane held her hand through all of it, and when the midwife placed their son in Rosa's arms, they both wept with joy and relief. They named him Daniel, after Rosa's father, and he was perfect in every way that mattered. Rosa's lungs struggled for weeks after the birth, the strain of labor having aggravated her old injury. She spent most of her time in the reclining chair, holding Daniel, nursing him, watching him sleep. Kane took over all the household work and managed both the ranch and the business, somehow keeping everything running smoothly. Rosa felt guilty about her helplessness, but Kane refused to hear it. "You just gave me a son," he said firmly. "You are allowed to rest and heal. The rest of it will keep." Slowly, gradually, Rosa's strength returned. By the time Daniel was 3 months old, she was back in the workshop part-time, designing new pieces while Thomas and the other apprentices did the heavy lifting. By 6 months, she was working almost full days again, though she still tired more easily than before. The reclining chair remained a fixture in their bedroom, a reminder of how far she had come, and a tool she still needed sometimes. Daniel grew into a happy, healthy toddler full of energy and curiosity. He loved the workshop and would sit for hours watching his mother work, his small hands playing with wood scraps. Rosa made him a tiny toolbox for his 2nd birthday, with child-sized tools, and Kane taught him to hammer nails into scrap boards. Their family felt complete and joyful, built on a foundation of mutual respect and deep love. When Daniel was 3, Rosa found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, perhaps because her body had adjusted. She carried through the summer heat without major complications, and their daughter was born in early spring of 1899, a quick labor that left Rosa tired but triumphant. They named her Clara, after Kane's mother, and she had her father's gray eyes and her mother's determined chin. Daniel was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to hold her constantly, and Rosa and Kane marveled at their small, perfect family. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, the business thrived, and Kane and Rosa grew deeper into their love and partnership. They added onto the house, building more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They upgraded the workshop again, installing better ventilation and more storage. They bought more land, more cattle, and hired more help for both the ranch and the carpentry business. Rosa's reputation spread beyond New Mexico. She received letters from as far as California and Colorado, people wanting her specialized furniture. She began training her apprentices not just in carpentry but in problem solving, teaching them to listen to clients and design pieces that met specific needs. The work felt meaningful in a way that sewing never had, and she thanked Providence every day for the lung fever that had paradoxically led her to this life. Daniel showed an early aptitude for ranching, following his father everywhere, learning to ride and rope and manage cattle. Clara, on the other hand, gravitated toward the workshop, watching her mother work with intense focus. By the time she was 5, she could identify every tool and explain its purpose. Rosa began teaching her simple projects, the same way her own father had taught her, and the continuity of it made her heart ache with happiness. "We are blessed," she told Kane one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard. "We are," he agreed. "Though I would argue we made our own blessings. We worked for this, Rosa. We built it together." "The chair," she said suddenly. "It all started with the chair." It started before that. It started with a woman who refused to give up even when everything was against her. It started with a man who saw someone struggling and decided to help instead of looking away. Kane took her hand, his grip familiar and warm. It started with both of us being brave enough to try. That is what it takes, I think. Bravery and persistence and the willingness to build something new. Rosa thought about the reclining chair still in their bedroom after all these years. She rarely used it now, her lungs having healed as much as they ever would, but she kept it because it represented something important. It was a promise made physical, proof that someone had seen her suffering and acted to ease it. It was the foundation their whole life had been built on, the moment when everything changed. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too. Always have, always will." The years continued their forward march. Daniel grew into a capable young man who took over more and more of the ranch operations, freeing Kane to help Rosa with the business. Clara became a skilled carpenter in her own right, her hands as sure and steady as her mother's. They hired more help, expanded again, and Rosa's custom furniture became known throughout the Southwest as the best available. Kane and Rosa grew older together, their hair going gray, their bodies wearing the marks of hard work and good living. But they remained partners in every sense, finishing each other's sentences, working side by side, falling into bed together each night with the comfortable intimacy of two people who had truly become one. When Daniel was 20 and Clara was 17, Daniel announced his engagement to a neighbor's daughter, a capable young woman named Sarah who loved ranching as much as he did. The wedding was a joyous occasion, held at the ranch with half the territory in attendance. Rosa cried happy tears watching her son promise to love and cherish his new wife, and Kane held her hand and smiled, remembering their own simple ceremony years before. Clara showed no interest in marriage, much to her mother's amusement. She was devoted to carpentry and announced at 19 that she wanted to take over the business eventually, to carry on what Rosa had built. Rosa was thrilled and began teaching Clara everything she knew. All the tricks and techniques her father had taught her and all the innovations she had developed herself. The reclining chair became something of a legend. People who visited the ranch always wanted to see it, this piece of furniture that had started everything. Rosa told the story often, how she had been sleeping sitting up because lying down hurt, and how Kane had built her a chair that reclined, how that simple act of kindness had changed both their lives, had led to love and marriage and family and prosperity. It was never just a chair, Kane would say, his arm around Rosa's waist. It was a promise that she did not have to suffer alone, that someone cared enough to act. It was the beginning, Rosa would add. The moment I realized that asking for help was not weakness, and that accepting love did not mean losing myself. On their 25th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Daniel and Sarah had 3 children now, and Clara had finally met someone who understood her passion for woodworking, a quiet man named Peter who worked as a furniture designer in Santa Fe. The house was full of noise and laughter, and Rosa looked around at the family they had built and felt overwhelming gratitude. Kane found her standing alone in the workshop, running her hand over the old workbench. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come. About how different life could have been if you had not walked into Mrs. Henderson's boarding house that day. Do you ever regret it? Marrying so quickly, trusting me when you barely knew me?" Rosa turned in his arms to face him, her hands coming up to cup his weathered face. "Not for a single moment. You saved my life, Kane. Not just by building me a chair, but by showing me that I deserved to be saved, that I was worth the effort. You were always worth it. You are still worth it." They kissed, a soft, sweet kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership. Around them, the workshop stood ready for another day of work, tools hanging in their places, wood stacked and waiting. The business would continue, passed on to Clara and eventually to her children. The ranch would thrive under Daniel's management. And Kane and Rosa would continue building their life together day by day, year by year, until the end of their days. That night, after the guests had gone home and the house was quiet, Rosa sat in the reclining chair one last time, not because she needed it for her lungs, but because she wanted to remember. Kane joined her, settling onto the floor beside the chair, his hand resting on her knee. "Tell me again," she said softly. "Tell me why you did it." "Built the chair?" "Yes." Kane was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Because I saw you struggling, and I knew I could help, because my mother had suffered and I could not save her. But maybe I could save you because the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you, and I knew you were important, that we were important even though we had not met yet." He looked up at her, his gray eyes still as clear and steady as they had been 25 years ago. "And because building things is what I do. I build fences and barns and businesses and families. The chair was just another thing to build, except it became the most important thing I ever built because it brought you into my life." Rosa felt tears slip down her cheeks. Good tears, grateful tears. "I would not have survived without you. Not just the chair, but you. Your love, your partnership, your refusal to let me carry everything alone. We saved each other. That is what love does, Rosa. It builds strength where there was weakness, hope where there was despair. It takes two people who are struggling alone and makes them stronger together. We built a good life. We built a great life, and we are not done yet." Rosa smiled through her tears. "No, we are not done yet." They sat together in the quiet workshop, surrounded by the tools of their trade and the evidence of their success. Outside, the New Mexico night was vast and star-filled, and somewhere in the house their children slept peacefully. The cattle grazed in the valley, the windmill turned steadily, and the land stretched out around them, solid and real, and theirs. The reclining chair, that simple piece of furniture born from compassion and skill, stood as a monument to the moment everything changed. It was weathered now, the padding compressed from years of use, the wood darkened with age. But it was still solid, still functional, still doing what it was built to do. Supporting, comforting, making hard things easier. Just like love, Rosa thought. Just like marriage, like partnership, like family. Building something strong enough to last, flexible enough to adjust, comfortable enough to rest in. That was what Kane had given her all those years ago and what they had given each other every day since. "Thank you," she whispered, not just to Kane, but to Providence, to fate, to whatever force had brought them together. "Thank you for everything." Kane stood and helped her up from the chair, and together they walked back to the house, hand in hand, ready for whatever the future would bring. Because they had each other, and they had the life they had built together, and that was more than enough. That was everything. The end came peacefully for both of them decades later, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, their hands joined even at the very last. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Clara made sure the reclining chair stayed in the family, a treasured heirloom passed down through generations. People told the story for years afterward about the woman who slept sitting up because lying down hurt, and the cowboy who built her a chair that reclined, and how that simple act of kindness had built an empire of love and family and prosperity. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was simpler than that. It was about two people who were brave enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to accept help, and wise enough to build something lasting from a moment of compassion. It was about finding love in unexpected places and learning that sometimes the things we think will break us actually make us stronger. It was about partnership and persistence and the quiet daily work of building a life together. And at the center of it all, solid and simple and enduring, was a reclining chair that represented everything good that love could build, everything beautiful that two people could create when they decided to face the world together instead of alone. It stood as proof that kindness matters, that seeing someone suffering and choosing to act can change everything, that the smallest gestures can have the largest consequences. Rosa and Kane Sutton built more than furniture and ranches and businesses. They built a legacy of love that lasted long after they were gone, a testament to the power of compassion and the strength of two hearts joined in common purpose. And it all started with a chair, a man who cared enough to build it, and a woman brave enough to accept what it represented, a promise, a beginning, a love that would last forever.